Long before private jets, long before mansions, long before scandal, there was a teenager from Brooklyn. Jeffrey Epstein was born on January 20th, 1953, in New York City. He grew up in a modest working-class neighborhood. Nothing about his childhood suggested he would one day move among billionaires, royalty, and world leaders. Yet somehow, he did. After graduating high school, Epstein attended college briefly, but he never earned a degree. Still, he found his way into one of Manhattan's most prestigious schools, the Dalton School. There, he taught mathematics and physics, despite lacking the qualifications typically required. It was an unusual opportunity, and it placed him in direct contact with New York's wealthy elite. Then came a meeting that would change everything. Alan Greenberg, the CEO of Bear Stearns, one of the most powerful investment banks on Wall Street. Soon after, Epstein left the classroom and entered finance. What happened next would transform a schoolteacher into a man surrounded by wealth, influence, and mystery. By the early 1980s, Jeffrey Epstein had left the classroom behind. Wall Street was now his world. At Bear Stearns, he quickly climbed the ranks. Colleagues described him as intelligent, confident, and unusually skilled at navigating powerful social circles. But his career at the firm would not last. In 1981, Epstein departed Bear Stearns under circumstances that have remained the subject of public curiosity and reporting. Soon after, he entered a new chapter, one that would become even more mysterious. During the 1980s, Epstein worked alongside businessman Stephen Hoffenberg. Hoffenberg later became known for operating Towers Financial Corporation. Years later, the company collapsed in one of the largest Ponzi schemes in American history. Epstein was never charged in connection with that fraud, yet his association with Hoffenberg would attract lasting scrutiny. Then came the relationship that transformed his life: Leslie Wexner, the billionaire founder of Victoria's Secret. At a time when Epstein appeared to a few publicly known financial clients, Wexner granted him extraordinary access. Epstein began managing major aspects of Wexner's financial affairs. Over time, the former schoolteacher acquired mansions, private aircraft, luxury properties, and a lifestyle normally reserved for billionaires. Yet questions remained. Who exactly were his clients? How much money did he truly manage? And how did he accumulate such immense wealth? The answers were often unclear. But one thing was certain. Jeffrey Epstein had successfully entered a world most people would never even see. And from that position, he began building a network unlike any other. By the 1990s, Jeffrey Epstein had become a familiar figure in elite circles. Scientists, billionaires, politicians, celebrities. Many knew his name. Few understood how he had reached that position. But behind the glamorous image, a darker story was beginning to emerge. By the 1990s, Jeffrey Epstein was no longer just a financier. He had become a fixture in elite social circles. His residences attracted a steady stream of influential visitors: business leaders, scientists, politicians, academics, celebrities. Over time, Epstein cultivated an image of exclusivity. His homes became gathering places for conversations about finance, technology, science, and global affairs. One of his most famous properties was a private island in the Caribbean. To supporters and guests, it appeared to be a luxurious retreat. To investigators and victims, it would later become a central focus of scrutiny. Epstein also maintained properties in New York, Florida, New Mexico, and Paris. Together, they formed a network of locations that would later become important to investigators. At the center of this world stood Ghislaine Maxwell, the daughter of British media magnate Robert Maxwell. For years, Maxwell was one of Epstein's closest associates. According to later court proceedings and testimony, she played a significant role in introducing young women and girls into Epstein's social orbit. As his influence grew, so did the allegations. Behind the private dinners, the luxury properties, and the powerful connections, a darker reality was beginning to emerge. And eventually, someone would report it. In 2005, a complaint filed by the family of a 14-year-old girl would trigger an investigation. What began as a local police inquiry would eventually expose one of the most controversial criminal cases in modern American history. In March 2005, a complaint reached the Palm Beach Police Department. A 14-year-old girl told investigators she had been paid to visit Jeffrey Epstein's home for a massage. At first, the allegation appeared to be an isolated incident, but investigators soon discovered something far more disturbing. As detectives dug deeper, more young women began coming forward, and a pattern started to emerge. According to police findings, girls were allegedly recruited through a referral system. Some were reportedly paid to bring friends. Those friends were then encouraged to recruit others. Investigators would later compare the operation to a pyramid structure. The more they looked, the larger the case became. Detectives interviewed dozens of potential victims. Searches of Epstein's residence uncovered evidence that investigators believed supported the allegations. By 2006, the Palm Beach Police Department had recommended multiple felony charges. The lead investigator later stated that his department believed the evidence was overwhelming. But the case was about to leave local authorities and enter the federal system. What followed would become one of the most controversial legal decisions in modern American history. Because despite the growing evidence, Jeffrey Epstein would not face a federal trial. Instead, a secret agreement was being negotiated behind closed doors. By 2007, federal prosecutors had spent months investigating Jeffrey Epstein. According to later reporting and court records, prosecutors had developed a potential federal case involving serious charges. For many investigators, it appeared that Epstein was finally running out of options. But behind closed doors, negotiations were taking place. Negotiations that would fundamentally change the outcome of the case. The result was a non-prosecution agreement, often referred to as the NPA. Under the agreement, federal prosecutors agreed not to pursue federal charges against Epstein. Instead, he would plead guilty to state charges. The deal also contained provisions that later generated widespread controversy. Years afterward, critics would argue that the agreement provided unusually broad protections and prevented a full federal trial from taking place. Even more controversial, many victims were not informed while negotiations were occurring. Years later, a federal judge would rule that prosecutors violated the Crime Victims' Rights Act by failing to properly notify victims. Then came the sentence. In 2008, Epstein pleaded guilty to state charges involving solicitation and procurement of minors. He was sentenced to 18 months in jail. But what happened next shocked many observers. Epstein was granted work release for up to 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. He was allowed to leave jail and report to his office. To critics, it appeared that one of the most connected men in America was receiving treatment unavailable to ordinary defendants. Public outrage grew. Victims questioned how such a deal had been approved. Journalists questioned the secrecy. Legal experts questioned the fairness. And yet, for years, the case appeared finished. Jeffrey Epstein had avoided a federal trial. The story was fading from public attention. At least, that was how it seemed. That would later be called one of the most extraordinary plea agreements in American legal history. For nearly a decade, the case remained largely dormant. Jeffrey Epstein continued living in luxury. The public moved on, the media moved on, the justice system appeared to have moved on. But in 2018, one investigation would bring everything back into the spotlight. And this time, the consequences would be far more serious. For years, Jeffrey Epstein's case seemed closed. The plea deal had been signed, the sentence had been served, and public attention had faded. But in 2018, everything changed. The Miami Herald published an investigative series called Perversion of Justice. The reporting examined how the 2007 agreement had been negotiated, how victims had been excluded, and how a major federal prosecution had disappeared. The reaction was immediate. Public outrage exploded. Questions that had been ignored for years suddenly returned to the national conversation. Why had Epstein received such extraordinary treatment? Who approved the agreement? And who had benefited from his protection? Federal authorities reopened their examination of the case. The pressure continued to build. Then came July 6th, 2019. Jeffrey Epstein's private jet landed at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey. Federal agents were waiting. Epstein was arrested on federal charges involving the alleged sex trafficking of minors. For the first time in years, it appeared that he would face a major federal prosecution. Investigators searched his Manhattan mansion. According to prosecutors, thousands of photographs were recovered, along with documents and other evidence. The image of Jeffrey Epstein began to change. No longer the mysterious financier, no longer the well-connected socialite. Now he stood at the center of one of the most closely watched criminal cases in America. The trial promised answers. Victims hoped for accountability. Journalists prepared for a legal battle that could expose years of hidden information. But the trial would never happen. Because just weeks after his arrest, the story took another dramatic turn. The justice system appeared to have moved on. But in 2018, one investigation would bring everything back into the spotlight. And this time, the consequences would be far more serious. The trial promised answers. It promised testimony, evidence, cross-examinations, and perhaps a clearer understanding of how Jeffrey Epstein had operated for so many years. But on August 10th, 2019, those expectations came to an abrupt end, and a new controversy began. On August 10th, 2019, Jeffrey Epstein was found unresponsive in his cell at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Manhattan. He was 66 years old. Emergency personnel attempted to revive him, but shortly afterward, he was pronounced dead. The New York City chief medical examiner later ruled the death a suicide by hanging. Officially, the case was closed. But the controversy was only beginning. Almost immediately, questions emerged about the conditions inside the prison. According to later investigations and reports by the Department of Justice Inspector General, multiple serious failures had occurred. Required inmate checks were missed. Prison guards reportedly fell asleep during their shifts. Records were falsified, and several procedures designed to monitor high-risk inmates were not properly followed. The revelations shocked the public. How could one of the most high-profile prisoners in America be left without proper supervision? The failures fueled widespread skepticism. Conspiracy theories quickly spread across the internet. Some people believed Epstein had taken his own life. Others believed there was more to the story. But despite years of speculation, no public evidence has emerged proving that Epstein's death was a homicide. What remains undeniable is that his death ended the possibility of a public trial. There would be no testimony, no cross-examinations, no courtroom revelations, no final verdict. For victims, many questions remained unanswered. For investigators, important leads remained unfinished. And for the public, the mystery only deepened. The man at the center of the case was gone, but the documents, the evidence, and the network surrounding him remained. Jeffrey Epstein was dead, but the investigations continued, the lawsuits continued, and the documents continued to emerge. In the years following his death, attention shifted toward the people around him, most notably Ghislaine Maxwell. For years, Maxwell had been one of Epstein's closest associates. According to prosecutors, she played a central role in helping recruit and groom underage victims. In 2021, a federal jury convicted Maxwell on multiple charges related to sex trafficking and conspiracy. The conviction represented one of the most significant legal outcomes connected to the Epstein case. But public interest remained focused on something else: the documents, court filings, depositions, flight logs, witness testimony. Thousands of pages of records were gradually released through civil litigation and court proceedings. Together, they became known by the media and the public as the Epstein Files. The files revealed details about Epstein's operations, his properties, his social circles, and the testimony of victims and witnesses. But they also created confusion. Many people assumed that appearing in a flight log, contact book, or court document automatically implied criminal wrongdoing. That assumption was often incorrect. A name appearing in a document is not proof of criminal conduct. A flight is not a conviction. An allegation is not a verdict. And a court filing is not always evidence of guilt. Even today, many questions remain unanswered. How did Epstein acquire and maintain so much influence? How did he avoid serious consequences for so many years? Were there additional individuals who should have faced criminal accountability? And will all of the evidence ever become public? Some questions have answers. Others may never be fully resolved. But perhaps the most important lesson of the Epstein case is not about one man. It is about institutions, law enforcement, politics, media, wealth, influence, and the consequences that occur when power operates without scrutiny. Jeffrey Epstein's story began with mystery. It ended with controversy. And years later, the questions still remain.